Hi, I'm Kurt Smith, and welcome to App Talks, a series of conversations with Salesforce customers on how using business apps from the App Exchange can help you manage all aspects of your business. Today, we're going to talk about how Lexmark teamed with Deloitte Digital to transform their sales, planning, and forecasting process by using Anaplan. So Jeff and Brett, welcome to App Talks.
Hey, thanks, Kurt.
Brett, why don't you tell us a little bit about Lexmark and your role there?
Yeah, you bet. So I've been with Lexmark for 19 years, if you can imagine that. I'm a global business architect for sales and marketing, so it's my job to kind of know everybody and all the things that are going on and to try to improve that sales process from around the world. Lexmark is a $3.5 billion international company. We do business all over the world. We've got about 1,000 salespeople in 3 different sales forces, and we get over half of our revenue from outside the United States.
And Jeff, Deloitte Digital.
Yes, I'm an engagement director at Deloitte Digital, and I've had the pleasure of working with Brett and the Lexmark team. I'm often involved with doing some of our most complex and most challenging implementations, and Lexmark's been a pleasure to work with through the years.
And how long have you been using Salesforce? How long have you been a customer?
We started actually about 3 years ago. Jeff and I were just talking about this with Deloitte after transitioning from another CRM. It's kind of interesting because it relates to our corporate strategy. And so in the last 5 years, we've actually spent over $1 billion to acquire about 10 different software companies. Okay? Well, as we did that, they came with their own CRMs. We had adopted Siebel. In fact, I was the guy that brought Siebel to Lexmark back in 2002. And as we bought all these cool, hip software companies, we realized that there was one thing they all had in common. They were all using Salesforce.com. And so when we saw that all of these different software companies were using Salesforce, and we could tell that Siebel was getting long in the tooth, we thought it was probably time to look at a change.
So, and that's where Deloitte Digital comes in, obviously. So, Jeff, how you guys are involved? You guys come in and you look at the disparate systems. They have Siebel. They have all these other companies they've purchased that are using Salesforce. How do you guys attack that challenge?
Well, we looked at that this was not just a Siebel replacement. This was not a rip and replace. This was an opportunity to transform Lexmark and Lexmark's disparate sales teams into one organization that could sell software and hardware across the globe through the different geographies and different sales channels. So taking those two sales teams together, figuring out what was the right processes, what was it going to take so they could share accounts, they could share opportunities, and sell, market, and service their customers together is what was the journey that we went through to get them to where they are today.
That's right.
And how does Anaplan fit into that?
Yeah, good question. So Anaplan is really a really pretty interesting platform because what large companies, I even think medium-sized and small companies find is you've got these great systems. So you got Salesforce for CRM, we have SAP for ERP, and they're at either end of the business process. And when you look at your business process, what you discover is the way that you're connecting the process and the data is with spreadsheets, right? So we're this 12,000 person, $3 billion international company, and an amazing number of our business processes are run on spreadsheets. Right? And you look at that and you think, well, this is just crazy. How could this be? But there are certain business processes that are actually hard to hold in a transactional system. And so you wind up doing it in the spreadsheet. But then as that process becomes successful and you run more and more of your business off of it, you start to realize the spreadsheet's not going to scale.
What were some of the initial high-level results you saw after you started using Anaplan?
Yeah, so we use Anaplan in 2 primary business cases right now. One is for demand forecasting to pass to supply chain, and then the other is the territory management that Jeff was talking about. For the demand forecasting, the key thing there is, first of all, to realize this is a process that sales reps hate. Right. They have to do it every month.
Yeah,
they have to do it because we're a manufacturer, so we make things and we make them all over the world, got to ship them to different places. So we have to have that demand forecast, but it's the last thing in the world a sales rep likes to do. Okay. Much less to have them say, oh, would you do that again? Because we sent you the old version of the spreadsheet, right? So now to have all that up in the cloud where we change it whenever we need to roll it up from sales rep to district manager to region, geo, and headquarters, that process goes from days to seconds. On a territory management process, we would take like a month to assemble the data, and then a half a month to put it into spreadsheets and to cut it all up and email your entire customer list all over the world. You don't talk about a security concern. My entire customer list is floating around in email in a bunch of spreadsheets, right? So now you get rid of all that stuff on the front end and you put it into really a really easy user interface. So the front end data gymnastics go away. The middle part where you need to have the sales input is so much easier for them. It's so much more insight. And then the back half to kind of reassemble it and push it back, that all kind of goes from, again, weeks to seconds.
And the security there, because now people only see the data
That
in
they're
the
allowed to
system.
see. That's right.
And you don't have, if I remember right, you would literally cut the spreadsheet into parts.
Yeah.
So there was more security on who
Yeah.
was getting what account. And then you'd try to glue
Reassemble
it
it
all
all
back
together, and you're like, oh God, nobody insert a column, okay? You know.
Jeff, I wanted to ask you, how did Deloitte Digital start the implementation of Anaplan?
Anaplan is actually, it's fun to implement. It's a lot like Salesforce, where you don't need heavy, hardcore developers to develop Anaplan. We did this in parallel with a lot of the Salesforce work we did during the first implementation. And it takes a good business analyst to define the right rules and the right business processes. It takes an Anaplan modeler and typically a few offshore developers, and you can get a fairly complex model up in a couple of months. You can show progress in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and just like Salesforce using an agile methodology, you can keep iterating and keep expanding your model and validating your model with the right business representatives to make sure you're going along the right path as you develop it.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And how has this impacted the sales organization?
Well, from a sales standpoint, it gets them out of things that they just can't stand to do, right? So, and that frees up time for selling, it frees up time for customer engagement, right? And it frees up kind of brain power to really think about it. So the point of getting the forecast is more than just, let's figure out what to make in China or in Mexico. The point of the forecast is, what's going on with your customer? When do they really need the product? When's that deal going to close? You can imagine just the creativity that's unleashed for the sales rep when they don't have to kind of be thinking about all this spreadsheet stuff. Instead, they've got a very intuitive tool to work with. The same thing's true in territory management. I kind of jokingly call it the most wonderful time of the year, right? It's the fourth quarter, right before December, the most wonderful time of the year, and everybody kind of gets the dark humor of that joke. What made it so awful was because you had all these spreadsheets. If you got 1,000 sales reps, you got 1,000 territories, you got 200 district managers, right? You got to roll all that stuff up. Okay. Now you take that whole business process, you put it into the cloud in a much better user interface. Jeff will talk about this in a second. And they can make the changes to model improved territories and see the results of the change in real time.
That's fantastic. And how long did it take for the sales team to actually start using it and breathing it, living it?
Well, I mean, it was right away. I mean, it was like a duck to water. I was kind of actually surprised. I expected more problems than we really had.
Yeah, forecasting went out and was fairly smooth, and we launched it, a month after we launched Salesforce, just to give them time to acclimate to the Salesforce tool, and then forecasting went out.
Yep.
And then territory realignment happens once a year, so we had a few months before we hit the wonderful time of the year.
Yeah, but we spent that on the process design,
exactly.
right? We put in place for the first time a territory scoring model, so we could actually have a way to say how good is the territory. You couldn't do that before in Excel because it was like 17 different pivot tables and don't insert a column and all that kind of stuff, right? And so, we trained them with videos. We just thought we flew everybody around, and they were using it, the next week, without any complaint. I remember being kind of surprised at how underwhelming
We were very prepared to actually have SWAT teams ready to take phone calls, and the phone calls were few and far between because it was fairly intuitive, and it just rolled up and went out. And I think we started in Europe and then did North America the following month, and didn't miss a beat.
Nah, it was really surprisingly easy.
That's incredible. So how did it impact your customers?
Yeah, so the way it impacts customers is a little bit under the covers, right? So from forecasting, it impacts customers because that way they get the product that they ordered on the time that they ordered it, okay? So we want that to be invisible to them, right? We don't want them to kind of think about, oh gosh, thanks for making my product appear on time. That's just what should happen, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so forecasting affects the customers from that way in that you don't have a customer satisfaction problem. You have the right product at the right time. And you think about us, we're a manufacturer. We've got tens of thousands of SKUs that are sold all over the world, right? We work with thousands and thousands of partners. That supply chain job's a tricky job. And so that's the way that the customer is impacted there. On the territory management side, the customer is impacted again, in a positive way, because it's all about relationships in the end, right? We got all the great SAPs and Salesforces. We got great partners like Deloitte. But in the end, it's about the relationship between the sales rep and the customer. And you don't want to disrupt that thing, certainly not unnecessarily. So to be able to design these territories in the midst of your customers growing and changing, but to do so in a way where you recognize how much customer disruption you're causing, you try to minimize that, only have that happen when it's absolutely necessary, that's a big impact for customers.
Absolutely. So great impact on the sales team and the sales process, great impact on the positive impact on the customer relationships and making sure that doesn't get broken in your supply chain. How about the bottom line for Lexmark?
Yeah, I think the bottom line for Lexmark shows up in things like improved cash cycles because you don't have an inventory problem because you didn't make the wrong thing, right? I think it shows up in sales reps that are going to be more productive because they're not wasting all this kind of mental and, quite frankly, emotional energy on tasks that are harder than they need to be, right? And so that frees up more time selling in the field.
Oh, absolutely. So we've been talking about Anaplan. Let's bring in Nicholas from Anaplan and see a demo.
Kurt, thanks very much. It's interesting to listen to you guys talk about how Anaplan adds a lot of value to Salesforce data. It's one of the most common use cases we have in our client base. And in particular, sales forecasting and territory management are very common applications with Salesforce data. Today I'm going to walk you through sales forecasting in Anaplan from using Salesforce data. I thought it was interesting listening to you guys talk that one of the key benefits you've had with Anaplan is the fact that data rolls up instantaneously. And it's true, when you use Anaplan, you have one repository of information. So the minute the data is loaded from salesforce.com, it's available to everyone in the sales organization. And that enables VPs to see results in real time instead of having to wait for spreadsheets to be aggregated and consolidated. Here we have a dashboard that's been laid out specifically for VPs. They can select their territory. They can select the quarter that they're interested in, either the current quarter or maybe the next quarter. And they can start to review from the top down how the quarter is coming together. They have the same view of SFDC last week versus this week, and they can see how each different region is adding into the total forecast. They have the view by product, and they can drill down into the details to see performance by region as well as by subregion. And with Anaplan, we give the ability to pull in even the lowest level details and display them to the VPs. So for subregion managers, what they're really concerned about is being connected to their people. They'd like to be able to see each one of their reps and understand the opportunities that each rep is working on and how their quarter is coming together. You can see here that in a bird's eye view, they have the ability to move week by week through Salesforce data and understand what deals are lost, what's moved out, what's moved in, and where their commit is coming. They can also zero in on a salesperson, and they can see the performance of their various opportunities. This gives subregion managers visibility and confidence in their numbers that they report upwards. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how Salesforce data can actually be used in Anaplan to help us performance manage our reps. If I click on the Rep Metrics dashboard, you can see that we're using Anaplan here to calculate a whole series of key performance indicators about our reps. For example, we've set up Anaplan model here to track velocity KPIs as to how many days on average a deal stays in a particular stage in Salesforce by rep. And you can see very quickly that it's easy for us to zero in on reps that may need a little assistance, helping to improve their performance in certain areas. The next thing that a manager would really like to do is be able to understand the impact of targeting better performance. If I click on the metric forecasting dashboard, what we've laid out here is the ability for regional managers to actually perform modeling tasks. You can see that we have our same key performance indicators as to the number of days on average that things stay in a particular stage. On average across all the reps, days in stage are for negotiate and review is 32. But if I'd like to target 27, I can see how that would impact my metrics and my forecast. And if I change that to, say, 30, immediately you can see how my forecast will change. This allows the regional managers to really do what-if analysis and forecast more accurately as they move through the quarter. Kurt, back to you.
Thanks, Nicholas. That was fantastic. It really showed the power of Anaplan and how easy that integration is. So one of the things we always like to do on App Talks is get some peer-to-peer advice. So I want to ask both of you, gentlemen, if, Brad, we'll start with you. If I was in your shoes now, where you were 3 years ago, what advice would you give me?
Boy, start with the process, right? So you don't really have to worry about the software anymore. Back in 2002, when we were first doing this thing, the software was kind of a pain. Configuration took a long time. Those days are gone. Salesforce is super fast to configure. Anaplan is super fast to configure. Instead, focus on your business process and start to realize that because of the spreadsheets that are in the middle of it, you might have some limitations in there that you can get rid of now, but you kind of have blinders on that you can't see it. So if you start with that process first and really get that to where you want, being able to design that in the tool now, boy, I mean, it literally takes days and weeks. It's really not hard at all.
Exactly. And one of the key things that you highlighted, align on that process and align on it globally. Because right now, what you're doing in Germany and what you're doing in the UK and what you're doing in America are probably three different models that use three different calculations. You standardize in Anaplan, and now they're all calculating the data the same way, which is a key benefit, but it also takes some time because you have to standardize on that. You don't want to have three different Anaplan models.
That's exactly right.
The other part of it is your spreadsheets are all two-dimensional. So you've got rows, you've got columns. Now, Anaplan is multi-dimensional. So take the time to think about the multi-dimensionality of it, because you're going to save space, you're going to have better performance. It's not recreating the rows and columns of your favorite spreadsheet. Use the power of Anaplan for better performance and better models, and quite frankly, better usability.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I would add is it's good to start with a good partner. Have a solid partner at the beginning. Because you do have to think about it in a different way. You sort of don't realize the limitations that you put on yourself. And it is sort of a spreadsheet on steroids. It's a platform that's this multi-dimensional thing. You got to learn how to think as a modeler. Sometimes that can be tough the first time you're out, so to have a good partner to help you with the implementation helps. But the nice thing is, it's not a bunch of code and like hardcore configurators. And so you can build your own center of excellence over time and expand to additional use cases, because I'm telling you, it will happen. That's what we've seen.
Great. Well, thanks, Brett and Jeff, very much for being here today. I enjoyed speaking with you. And thank you for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you on the next App Talks.